It was Christmas Eve. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones had settled over Detroit. My house, once a place full of music, food, and loud laughter, was still. An old jazz record scratched softly in the background, the same one my husband used to play when he carved the turkey, back before the cancer took him. I sat alone at the dining table, wrapping a small box with trembling fingers. The paper was red with gold stars, wrinkled from years of reuse. No tree, no lights, no smell of cinnamon or pine. Just me, the jazz, and the clock ticking too loud. No one had called all day. Not a knock at the door. Nothing. This gift was meant for Rashawn and the kids. I picked it out weeks ago, matching scarves I knitted myself. I imagined them all wearing them in a photo, maybe even tagging me in it. Foolish hope. A week ago, Rashawn had called. I remember the tone in his voice, flat, like a man reciting a line, not talking to his mother. "Hey, Ma," he said. "Listen, about Christmas this year, me and Jazz just want to keep it light, you know? No stress, no heavy energy. Maybe you sit this one out?" I paused. Just for a beat. Long enough for him to fill the silence. "It's not like that, Ma. It's just, we got a vibe we tryna set. And you kinda. You know. Sometimes throw it off." I swallowed, steadying my voice. "I know, baby. Y'all got your own thing now." He exhaled like he just escaped a burden. "Thanks, Ma. Love you. Love you too." Then I hung up, and stood there, phone still in hand, staring at nothing. That was when the weight settled in my chest. Not anger. Just that quiet kind of sadness that you don't cry about, because even your tears have learned to stay quiet. This wasn't the first time. I thought back to last year. They invited me, but after dinner. Said they didn't want the food to get cold. When I arrived, Rashawn's wife, Jasmine, gave me that tight-lipped smile. Like a customer service rep, not family. She never liked me. Always called me Miss Madeline instead of Mom. Claimed it was respect, but I could feel the distance in every syllable. I remembered the year I brought my famous sweet potato pie. Spent all day making it, just like my mother taught me. When I got there, they had 3 store-bought pies already on the counter. "Oh. We didn't know you were bringing one," Jasmine said, not even opening mine. After that, they stopped asking me to bring anything. And tonight? Tonight, they didn't even ask me to come. I pulled out an old photo album, one I hadn't touched in years. Rashawn, 6 years old, grinning with missing teeth and frosting on his cheeks. Christmas in '93. We didn't have much, but we had music, laughter, and love. That boy loved me with his whole heart. Where did that love go? The house smelled like pot roast and buttered rolls back then. Now it smelled like old wood and reheated coffee. I got up early on Christmas morning anyway. Put on my Sunday dress, navy blue with white buttons. Did my hair. Put on my earrings. I looked in the mirror and told myself, I'm still here. I still got love to give. I made a small dinner. Just enough for me. Fried chicken, greens, cornbread. I set the table with the nice dishes. Lit a candle. Sat down and whispered, to peace. The TV played a rerun of a church service from years back. Pastor Williams preaching about grace and forgiveness. I closed my eyes and let the words wash over me, but they didn't fill the ache. After I cleared my plate, I picked up the gift. I held it in my hands a long time, debating. Should I drive over and leave it at their doorstep? ring the bell and walk away? Instead, I stood, walked to the hall closet, and placed the box gently on the top shelf. Taped a yellow sticky note to it, for when they remember me. I didn't cry. I didn't call. I didn't explain. Sometimes silence says everything. Later that evening, I walked out to the mailbox. The wind had picked up, biting at my face. I opened the rusted metal flap and saw a single red envelope inside. No return address on the front, just my name in handwriting I hadn't seen in over 30 years. I stared at it, heart suddenly alert, breath shallow. It was him. I stood there in the doorway, the red envelope trembling in my hand like a pulse. I hadn't seen that handwriting since I was a much younger woman, before life hardened me, before I learned to stop expecting people to return what I gave. I took it inside, placed it gently on the table, and just looked at it. Funny how a thin piece of paper can hold the weight of a lifetime. I didn't open it right away. I boiled water for tea, the way I always do when I need to steady myself. The kettle whistled sharp and long, echoing through the empty rooms. I poured the water, squeezed a lemon slice into the mug, and sat down in my worn armchair. The house creaked the way old houses do, speaking in sighs. Only then did I slide a finger beneath the flap. Inside was a single sheet, cream-colored, folded neatly. At the top, Madeline, I need to speak to you. Elias. Elias. A name I'd buried. A man I once trusted. The man who walked out of my life without a backward glance. My brother. I leaned back, the room tilting just slightly. Memories I'd locked away pushed forward, the arguments, the silence, the betrayal. Elias had disappeared after Mama died, left me with funeral bills and a family to care for. He never called. Never helped. Now, 30 years later, his name was sitting on my table like a ghost. I read on. I've done you wrong. I know that. But I believe something is happening with Rashawn. He's not who he says he is, and I think you're in danger of losing more than just a Christmas invitation. Please. Hear me out. I set the page down slowly. The nerve. The gall. To vanish for decades, then return with warnings. As if I hadn't lived enough losses on my own. I walked into the kitchen, needing space, needing something solid to hold on to. My reflection in the dark window stared back, tired eyes, but not weak. I felt something stir in me, not grief this time, but curiosity laced with caution. What could he possibly know about my son? I thought about Rashawn. My baby boy, now a grown man with a mortgage, a wife, and a life too modern for me. He always said I worried too much. That I lived in the past. Maybe I did. But I never doubted his love before, even as he pushed me aside. Was Elias lying? Stirring trouble to pull himself back into my life? Or was there something I didn't see? I folded the letter slowly and placed it in the drawer beside the table. I didn't want it out, didn't want it in sight. But I couldn't throw it away either. That alone told me something, part of me wasn't done with this. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed, thinking of all the times Rashawn avoided eye contact when I asked simple questions. About work. About money. About why he never let me babysit the kids anymore. I remembered something then, last Thanksgiving. I arrived early, and he wasn't expecting me. I heard him on the phone, angry, whispering, "She can't know." Not now. When he saw me, he smiled too quickly and changed the subject. Back then, I told myself it was marriage trouble. But what if it wasn't? Morning light crept through the curtains, pale and cold. I rose, wrapped my robe tight, brewed fresh coffee. I stared at the drawer where the letter lay. Elias might be many things, but a liar wasn't one of them. And if he was reaching out, after 30 silent years something was wrong. I sat back down at the table, opened a fresh sheet of paper, and wrote. Elias. I don't forgive you. But I'm listening. My hand paused over my name. I signed it anyway. As I sealed the reply, a strange resolve settled in my chest. Maybe Christmas had been quiet. Maybe my son had shut me out. But I wasn't finished. I wasn't gone. And if there was a truth hiding in my own family, I was going to find it before it buried me for good. Christmas morning came in quietly. The sky outside was gray, like it hadn't made up its mind whether to snow or just sulk. I sat in my usual chair, coffee cooling in my hands. My robe hung heavy on my shoulders, the kind of weight that wasn't from fabric. The red envelope still sat on the mantel, unopened. I had placed it there last night, after rereading Elias's letter until the words blurred. But this one, it came from a different ghost. Elma. 30 years of nothing. And now her handwriting, neat and familiar, sat like a dare. What did she want now? I remembered the last time I saw her, storming out of that hospital room like I was poison. Mama's body hadn't even cooled, and Elma acted like I was the one who had let her slip away. I took a long sip from my cup, bitter now, and set it down. With fingers that trembled more than I wanted to admit, I broke the seal. I heard what happened with Rashawn. I'm sorry. That's all it said. 14 words and 3 decades of silence behind them. I whispered, after all this time? My eyes scanned the rest. A few vague sentences. Something about missing Mama. Something about things she wished she'd said sooner. But it was that one line that stopped me cold. It wasn't all your fault. I leaned back slowly. My breath caught in my throat. I hadn't thought about that day in years, not really. Not the way it actually unfolded. Mama had called me that morning, voice weak, asking me to come by. I was already on my way, but traffic on 8 Mile had backed up. By the time I got there, nurses were shaking their heads. Elma showed up minutes later, mascara smudged, rage already loaded in her chest. She died alone, she spat. You couldn't even be there for her. You always did think your job was more important than this family. And I didn't argue. I just took it. Let her throw every bitter word, every jab, until she slammed that hospital door behind her. Because sometimes it's easier to be blamed than to be believed. I sat there in silence, letter on my lap, past pressing in around me like smoke. I'd convinced myself we were better apart, safer. I thought keeping quiet meant keeping peace. But peace ain't always the absence of noise. Sometimes it's the absence of truth. Years later, Rashawn had asked me once, just once, why don't we ever talk to Aunt Elma? I gave him the line I'd rehearsed for years, some things are better left alone. Now I wondered, did he learn to cut people off from me? To put silence in place of understanding? That thought scraped something raw. Maybe I hadn't just been the victim in this story. Maybe I taught him more than I meant to. I reached for a pen and paper, started writing a reply to Elma. I got as far as I got your letter, before I stopped. My hand hovered. Then I ripped the page clean in half. Set the pieces in the trash without another glance. I needed air. Real air. Not recycled grief. I threw on my coat, wrapped a scarf tight, and stepped outside. The wind bit at my cheeks as I walked down our old block. Detroit in December always carries a bite, but it also carries memory. I passed the church where we used to sneak candy during long services. The corner store where Elma and I pulled coins for popsicles. The mural, faded now, that we helped paint one summer. Back when color seemed permanent and people didn't vanish. A man came out of the store, paused. "Ms. Vella," he said. "Haven't seen you in years." I smiled like I meant it. I've been around. But my heart was thudding. How many places had I disappeared from? How many folks had stopped looking for me? How long, I whispered to myself, can a place forgive your absence? My feet led me where they always did when I stopped thinking, back to our childhood home. Boarded windows, sagging porch. It looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had just grown too big for ghosts. I stood there a long time before heading home. Back inside, I dug through the bottom drawer and found an old Christmas card. One I bought for Elma years ago and never mailed. The front had a picture of two sisters holding hands, walking through snow. Inside, in my handwriting, even silence can be loud. "I miss you." I stared at it. Then, slow and sure, I signed it. Set it on the table next to her letter. Neither mailed. Not yet. I looked at both, hands on my hips, and said aloud to the room, "Let's see who finds courage first." Then my phone buzzed. A photo. Rashawn and his wife, smiling wide, drinks in hand at their Christmas party. Faces lit by fairy lights. Laughter caught mid-frame. But my eyes froze on the edge. In the background, partially turned, stood a figure I hadn't seen in 3 decades. Elma. What the hell is my sister doing at my son's house? I sat in my car out front, adjusting the collar of my coat. The gusts of December wind rattled the glass. I closed my eyes, said a silent prayer. If I stand tall, maybe they'll remember me. I thought of church Christmases past, when I wore that same dress, so bold, so proud. I'd lead a hymn or stand in front of the choir, gentler times. I rehearsed my greeting in my mind, "Merry Christmas to all." That was enough. I'd be present. I'd be seen. Walking in, I felt the heat of lights and chatter hit me at once. People greeted each other, laughter drifting like candle smoke. I scanned faces, so many changed, so many distant. Rian and Z were ahead, but we didn't make eye contact. They sat on the dais. I was ushered to a seat at the far side. Near pillars, not the center. The podium stood lit, microphone ready. The formal program started, family board, church elders, community donors. Names rolled out, accolades and thanks. But no mention of me. My throat closed on words I'd practiced. My pulse thudded. The speaker began, thanking the pillars of this family. Zoe, ministers, elders, long lists. My name? Not one syllable. Not even in passing. My chest squeezed. I remembered Mama's funeral, when my name was skipped in eulogy, though I stood there with trembling hands. Pride warred with shame. My heartbeat pounded so loud I thought folk would hear it. I clutched my purse. I pressed my fingers into leather, grounding myself. People applauded. I forced my hands to follow. Then I stood, whispered my excuse, stepped into the hallways. Cold marble walls, the hush swallowed me. My mind raced. Was I never meant to be part of their story? Did I exist only in memory now? The scarf I tucked earlier around my shoulders stung like a bruise. I found a mirror by a hallway window. Beneath the light's slight flicker, I saw a woman steadied by will. In that reflection I saw strength, though battered. In my bag I found the paper I once drafted, lines clipped, hopes outlined. I fingered it, whispered, if they won't call my name, I'll write it in. I stepped back into the hall, head high, though inside my heart trembled. As speeches continued without pause, the room seemed full, but I felt absent. At the end, as folk applauded and curtains closed, Rian approached me. He murmured, "Good job for being here." Then he added, "Madam Guest." The words struck like cold steel. "Madam Guest?" I said softly, voice barely a question. And I knew I would never accept that role again. I didn't change out of my dress when I got home. I sat on the edge of my bed, shoes kicked off, stockings still pinching my legs. The house felt tighter than usual, as if the walls had drawn closer while I was gone. His words wouldn't leave me alone, Madam Guest. I tried to distract myself. Turned on the television. Flipped through an old magazine. Opened the Bible on my nightstand. But everything blurred into the same hollow quiet. That name echoed louder than any silence I'd ever known. I thought of the nights I sat by his bedside when his asthma got bad, counting each breath like it was the only thing that mattered. I remembered helping him write his first school speech, telling him, "Speak like your name belongs in the room." Now he had stripped me of mine. I whispered, barely hearing myself, "Did all that love come with an expiration date?" Something inside me hardened. This wasn't grief anymore. This was fire. I stood, reached for my coat again. If I didn't speak now, I never would. Tonight. It had to be tonight. I called his phone first. Straight to voicemail. I texted, "Come by tomorrow. We need to talk." His reply came quick, busy. Maybe next week. Next week. Next year. Never. That was his rhythm with me, delay, deflect, dismiss. I grabbed my keys. No more waiting. The streets were still wet from an earlier flurry as I drove. His house glowed like a scene from a postcard, lights framing the windows, silhouettes moving inside. Laughter drifted through the cold night air as I walked up the path. I rang the bell. It was his wife who opened the door, lips tight but painted smooth. "Oh," she said. "We weren't expecting." "I know," I replied, stepping past her. "Where is he?" She hesitated, then pointed toward the living room. I walked in. A room full of people. Glasses clinking. Music low. Rian stood near the fireplace, drink in hand, smile wide, until he saw me. "Can I have a word, Rian?" I asked, not raising my voice. But the room fell quiet anyway. He blinked. "Ma, now's not." "Did you mean it?" I asked. "Am I a guest to you now?" A few heads turned. Someone shifted awkwardly. He glanced around, embarrassed. "You're making a scene." I nodded once. "No, son. You made the scene. I'm just finally stepping into it." He looked stunned. I took a breath, steady and sharp. "I watched you thanked every soul in this family but me tonight. You call strangers family and call your mother guest. Do you know what that does to a heart?" He tried to smile it off. "It wasn't like that." I cut in gently. "I carried you through nights when your lungs couldn't hold air. I worked double shifts so you wouldn't feel less than any child in your class. I wrote words for your tongue when you had none. And now, I'm the one outside your story?" No one spoke. Not one glass moved. "This isn't about a thank you," I continued. This is about being erased. His jaw tightened. No apology. Just silence. You want a mother who stays quiet in the corner? Then this is goodbye. I felt my hands tremble, but my voice refused. But if you want the woman who built you from scratch, then speak her name like it means something. I didn't wait for his answer. I turned and walked out, coats untouched, tears held back. The night air slapped my face as I reached the car. I gripped the wheel, shoulders shaking. The radio crackled to life on its own. A gospel voice sang, "He knows my name." A laugh, wet with tears, escaped me. At least God sees me. I drove with windows cracked, cold air slicing through the heat of my anger. I didn't hope for him to call. Hope, I knew now, was too expensive. When I got home, the voicemail light flickered. One message. I pressed play. It was Elma's voice. Soft. Measured. I saw what you did tonight and I think Mama would have been proud. She paused. But there's something you don't know. A week went by, heavy and airless, without a single call from Rian. I tried to lose myself in small routines, sweeping the porch, watering the winter plants in my kitchen, sitting through Sunday service. But even gospel couldn't dull what had been said. Madam guessed. It lingered like smoke. One afternoon, Elma came by, carrying a small tin of tea leaves, quiet as she stepped inside. She didn't greet me with a hug, only a nod. We sat in the kitchen, steam curling between us. She asked how I was, but her eyes avoided mine. Something was coiled in her silence. Then she mentioned it casually, like noting the weather. I saw the lawyer at Rian's the other day. He said they've been updating family business, paperwork, assets. She sipped her tea, acted as if she'd said nothing at all. But a cold knot tightened in my gut. My husband had set our will in stone before he passed. Nothing was meant to be touched, not without me. I looked at her then, long and steady. She looked away. On the radio, a gospel hymn whispered, "Stand still and see the salvation." It didn't feel like comfort. It felt like warning. I waited until she left before I reached for the phone. I called Mr. Banks, our old family lawyer. He hesitated before speaking. I was told to hold everything for now, he said. They said you've been forgetting things. They said I might be taking advantage of your state if I let you sign anything. My throat went dry. Who said that? There was a pause. Then, quietly, your son. And Elma co-signed the concern. I hung up without another word. My hand trembled against the receiver, heat building behind my eyes. This was more than dismissal. This was erasure, with paperwork to seal it. I dialed Elma. Meet me, I said. The park. Now. The cold air bit at my face as I waited by the old swing set, rust creaking in the wind. She arrived, arms crossed against the chill. I didn't move. Tell me what you signed. She flinched. Rian said you were under stress. We didn't want to alarm you. So you signed away my mind for his convenience? My voice didn't shake, but something inside me cracked open. She lifted her chin. We thought it was best for the family image. I stepped closer. You don't protect family by stabbing them in silence. Her eyes filled, but I had no sympathy left to give. All these years, I mistook her quiet for loyalty. She was simply obedient to whoever spoke loudest. I left her there, wind snapping at my coat, and drove straight home. I went to the cabinet where I keep my documents, my medical evaluations, power of attorney, estate agreements. I spread everything across the table. They would not write me out of my own life. I called Mr. Banks again. "Prepare a revocation of authority," I said. "My son will have no legal say over me." Then I phoned Dr. Howard at the clinic. "I need a cognitive assessment." On paper. He understood without asking why. Before night fell, I rang the church office. "Reserve Hall B for Friday. Family meeting." My voice was iron. I printed copies of the document Elma had signed, evidence of their betrayal. I would not scream. I would show. Later, in my room, I held a worn photograph of my husband, him in his Sunday suit, smiling with eyes that believed in me. "I'm not letting them erase your legacy," I whispered. "Or my mind." The radio had gone silent. I didn't need hymns anymore. The fire was mine now. On my desk, I opened my diary and wrote, "They tried to bury me. Didn't know I was a seed." As I gathered my papers into a folder, my phone buzzed. A message from Rian. "You sure you want to do this, Mama? Some things can't be undone." I stared at the screen, my heartbeat steady. He was scared. I woke before the sun did, Bible still open on my nightstand, unread. Couldn't sleep, not with what today held. My fingers brushed the scarf I laid out last night, same one I wore to my husband's burial, same one I wore when Rian graduated. I folded it over my shoulder, tied it like armor. I slipped on the same dress from last week's church gathering, the one they left me out of. Same dress, different day, but not the same woman. I drove through the neighborhood slow. Headlights carving up the dark, radio off. Just the sound of tires on asphalt and my breath. I pulled up to the church hall early. Doors locked. I sat on the steps, jacket wrapped tight, and waited. The street was empty. Cold air nipped at my knuckles. My heart tapped against my ribs like it was trying to escape. That word still haunted me, guest. Not tonight. Not again. I stood as a car turned the corner and parked. Z stepped out, arms full of cardboard boxes. Her heels clicked on the concrete like she was on some kind of mission. I squinted. She didn't see me at first. "Z," I said, voice firm. She jumped. Oh, hi, Miss Dora. I didn't know you were already here. I'm always earlier than folks expect." I walked closer. "What's in the boxes?" She shifted. "Just some things from the house. Trying to help tidy up. Make space." "Space for who?" She hesitated. "Well, Rian's been talking about converting your old room for the kids. Figured it was time. I'm just helping." I stepped between her and the trunk. "You call this helping? Taking my photo albums? The scarf my mama made? This ain't cleaning. This is clearing out." "I didn't mean anything by it," she said quickly, eyes darting. "You didn't mean to ask either." I looked her square in the eye. "I never moved out. Y'all just got comfortable acting like I didn't live there." People began to arrive, cousins, church folk, a few neighbors. They slowed as they saw us. No one said a word. But every silence in that parking lot was loud. Z set the box down, slowly, and stepped back. Inside the church hall, chairs were lined in a semicircle, podium set in the center. My name wasn't on any banner. No sign of "Welcome Dora." Just family names on glossy paper programs. Rian passed them out like he was hosting a fundraiser, not a reckoning. One of the ushers handed me a printed sheet. "Your speech, Miss Dora." I took it. "Read the first line." And froze. Where my words were supposed to be, my truth, my story, there were generic lines. Hollow praise. Empty sentences about family values and heritage. Nothing I wrote. Halfway down, a note in brackets, mother's lines edited by Rian. My chest burned. My breath came sharp and uneven. I sat down, back straight, staring at that paper like it was poison. You stole my voice. But not my story. I found him near the stage, chatting like nothing was wrong. I approached him slow. "Which lines didn't you like?" I asked. He stiffened. "I just cleaned it up a bit. Made it smoother." "For who?" "For everyone." I blinked. "So you edited me out? For everyone's comfort?" He rolled his eyes. "Don't make this a thing, Mama. It already is." I turned. Walked back to my seat, opened my purse, and pulled out the copy I'd written. The real one. Folded, marked, creased from being clutched too tight too long. I stood. Walked to the podium. My shoes echoed across the tile floor. Every eye in the room turned. Behind the podium was a mirror, hung high, part of the church's old layout. I caught my reflection. A woman past 60. Skin carved with years, not cracks. Shoulders squared, scarf tied like a battle flag. My eyes met my own. And there was fire. I spoke into the mic. "You made a speech that forgot me." My voice was steady. But my knees remembered every wound. I unfolded the paper, ready to speak what they tried to erase. Then, lights flickered. The mic popped, went dead. From backstage, a loud thud. A voice whispered behind me, "She's reading the real words." The lights had just flickered back on, humming low like the tension sitting in the center of that church hall. Folks shifted in their seats, quiet but on edge, watching me as if waiting for something to explode. The mic on the podium sputtered, then died. Maybe it was divine mercy. I stepped forward, cleared my throat, and said, "I don't need a machine to tell you all my truth." My voice was steady, not loud. Didn't need to be. I pulled out the original speech. The one Rian replaced with his polished version meant to sell me like a prop. I held the paper in one hand, fingers trembling slightly, not from fear, but from holding in too much for too long. I wrote this with my heart. Every line. Every pause. I started reading. Not performing, just remembering out loud. I talked about my husband. About how he marched for dignity with blistered feet, then came home to raise a son he thought would carry that same fire. I talked about the sacrifices, the jobs I turned down, the church events I cleaned alone, the way I'd sit up late sewing clothes just so Rian wouldn't feel less than at school. Nobody moved. Eyes softened. Some jaws locked tight. A gospel elder, head wrapped in a deep blue scarf, looked me square and nodded. "Speak it, Mama Dora." And I did. My voice didn't shake. My bones carried too many stories to tremble now. Then came the wave. It started slow. Whispers. Shuffling. A few heads turned toward Rian and Z. I caught the way people looked at them, like they were suddenly strangers in the very church they thought they owned. Someone in the back said what many were thinking, "Ain't no son supposed to treat his mama like that." I held up both versions of the speech. This, I said, holding Rian's clean edit, was meant to protect an image. Then I held up mine. This was meant to tell the truth. I passed both down to the front row, and one by one, folks leaned in to read. Gasps. Even Elma, who'd stood beside Rian this whole time, looked like someone had knocked the air out her. I didn't cry. But I let the ache in my chest come through. This ain't just my story, I said. This is every elder y'all leave behind when you decide we too much trouble. When we become inconvenient. Rian stood up. It wasn't like that, he started. I raised a hand. He kept talking. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. I was trying to protect our name. You don't protect a name by burning the roots. He froze. The room did too. Z suddenly seemed small next to him, eyes glued to the floor. I walked toward him, not fast, not slow. Just steady. Leaned in and said, low enough only he could hear, you forgot who taught you to walk. I remember. He looked like he wanted to disappear. That's when Sister Marlene stood. We know your truth, Dora. You ain't never been nothing but a rock. Others followed. Nods. Words of support. A young man from the youth choir, barely grown, but taller than me now, stepped forward. You helped raise half of us. We got your back. And just like that, the room shifted. People moved their chairs. Rian sat alone. Z? She slipped out the side door without a word. I stayed standing. Didn't collapse. Didn't cry. But my spine? Never straighter. When it was done, I left the podium. No applause. Just quiet. Heavy. Honoring. In the hallway, Elma reached for me, eyes full of regret. She didn't speak. Didn't have to. I nodded once, then walked on. Grace don't always need words. That night, back home, I found a letter slid under my door. Written in Rian's hand. I'm sorry. I never should have signed it. Let's talk, if you'll have me. The sun had barely crept past the curtains when I sat up in bed, letter still clutched in my hand like it might vanish if I let go. I hadn't truly read it the night before, just stared at the handwriting, the name, the weight of it. But this morning, I did. Line by line. Rian confessed. Said he lied about the money being gone. Said he held on to it, out of spite, not need. There was a receipt, a full transfer back to my account. No note. Just numbers. Cold, but real. He wrote about how the church used to call me Mother Dora and never said Deacon Rian. How I was always in someone's story, and he barely made the footnotes. He wrote that he hated how people looked at me like I was a saint, and looked at him like a shadow. Sometimes, I whispered, the ugliest things don't come from hate. They come from hurt. I folded the letter slowly. Left it on the nightstand. My chest didn't burn. My jaw wasn't tight. Just stillness. Later that afternoon, I stepped outside with a scarf around my shoulders and drove out toward where the wind talks through the oaks. The cemetery sat quiet as always. I knew which stone before I even pulled in. I parked, grabbed my purse, and walked toward his name, carved deep like it'd never fade. Hey baby, I said, kneeling. It's been a storm. My hands rested on my knees. I did what I could. Tried to hold it all together. Sometimes I used spit and prayer. I chuckled. And duct tape. I pulled an old photo from my purse, Rian as a toddler, standing on my husband's boots, hands in the air like he'd conquered the world. I placed it gently by the stone. I didn't get it all right. But I didn't stop loving them. My throat wobbled. Even when they forgot I was someone before I was their mama. A soft voice behind me said, "We never do. But we keep trying." An older woman, leaning on a cane, gave me the gentlest smile. I nodded, wiped my cheek, and stood. We stood together for a moment, two women who'd lived too much and still had more to give. Back home, I sat by the window. Thought about that letter. I picked up the phone, dialed, and waited for the voicemail tone. "Hey. It's me. I got your letter. I heard you. I ain't mad no more, but I ain't ready either." Silence sat with me for a second. Then I continued. "I'll call when I'm ready. If healing comes, let it be real. Not rushed. Not dressed up for Sunday. Just real." I hung up. Took the letter and tucked it in the back of the drawer, not with resentment, just with rest. Weeks passed. And then Sister Evelyn from church called. Said they were starting something for the seniors, a storytelling circle. Asked if I'd lead it. "Let me pray on it," I told her. That night, I pulled out one of my old journals. Not to write. Just to remember. I looked at the handwriting, the smudges, the little doodles in the corner. I smiled. Next morning, I told Evelyn yes. Every Thursday now, I sit with a handful of old souls who carry whole worlds inside them. We talk, we laugh, we share. Sometimes the stories don't make sense. Sometimes they break your heart. But they always matter. December came. Cold, but softer than last year. I dragged out the Christmas bin from the closet. Lights, old ribbons, that angel missing a wing. I decorated the porch, slow and steady. Neighborhood kids stopped by. Asked if they could help. I said sure. They strung lights all crooked, but it was beautiful anyway. One boy, maybe 10, asked, "Miss Dora, what's your favorite Christmas?" I looked at him. Then up at the blinking lights. The one that taught me peace don't come in a package. We sipped cocoa on the porch steps. Laughed about nothing. Gospel played faintly from the living room, just like it used to. Later that night, I found a package on my doorstep. No name. No return address. Inside was a frame. My speech, the real one. Printed, clean, bold. A note tucked behind the glass, "Your story saved me. Thank you." I touched the frame gently. Closed my eyes.